High atop Mount McGregor in upstate New York is a small treasure known as Grant Cottage. In the 19th century, Saratoga Springs was queen of American spas. The wealthy and famous from around the world flocked there to sample its mineral waters, horse racing, and grand society. 8 miles north of the city, the Palmerton Range, a spur of the southern Adirondacks, was offering cool, clear air and spectacular vistas to anyone who would venture up its wilderness trails. One such man was Duncan McGregor, a lumberman who bought 1,000 acres of land, including the summit and eastern slope. McGregor used the lumber from his sawmill to build a small hotel on the summit named the Mountain House. The Mountain House, which opened in 1878, became a popular destination for visitors seeking fresh air and beautiful scenery. From the house, views of the surrounding mountains, Hudson Valley, and nearby lakes were incomparable. By the early 1880s, bigger and better plans were being made for Mount McGregor. W.J. Arkell, a businessman from Canajoharie, and Joseph W. Drexel of New York saw the area as a perfect location for a new Adirondack resort. Together, they formed the Saratoga and Mount McGregor Improvement Company. The company started work on what later became the Saratoga, Mount McGregor, and Lake George Railroad. It was completed in just 3 months, and by July of 1882 was bringing visitors up the mountain. In 1883, the Mountain House was moved a few hundred feet south of the summit for use as a boarding house, as work began on a larger summer hotel to be called the Balmoral. In the summer of 1884, the Balmoral opened its 300-guest facility to glowing reviews. An elegant restaurant and adjacent art gallery to attract day visitors, as well as the railway to bring these visitors to the door, helped the Balmoral and Mount McGregor begin to compete with Saratoga as a popular vacation spot. In the spring of 1885, Drexel bought the Mountain House and planned to renovate it for his family's use. But fate and his own generosity changed these plans. 1885 was a heartbreaking year for one of the most famous and well-loved men in the country. Ulysses S. Grant, hero of the Civil War, savior of the Union, 2-term president and world-renowned traveler, was engaged in the most difficult battle of his life. Faced with financial ruin and inoperable throat cancer, Grant was in a race with death to finish his memoirs, the only remaining way he had to provide for his beloved wife, Julia. As summer approached, his doctors urged him to move from New York City to a cooler and drier area. When Drexel heard this, he offered use of the cottage to the general and his family. On June 16th, General Grant arrived with his family and soon settled into a routine of life at the resort. The general spent his days on the wide porch, enjoying the cool air and company of his family while he completed his memoirs. During the 6 weeks Grant and his family were at the cottage, thousands of people traveled up the mountain to catch a glimpse of this great man and, if possible, pay their respects to the general. Grant sometimes made trips to the eastern outlook to enjoy the scenic beauty of the Hudson Valley, as so many people had before him. To the east lay the Saratoga battlefield with Vermont's Green Mountains beyond. To the south, the distant Catskills. To the north, the rugged Adirondacks. On July 23rd, 3 days after finishing his memoirs, Ulysses S. Grant died at Drexel Cottage. As preparations were being made in New York City for his interment, Grant's mourning family remained at the cottage. Condolence messages and visitors arrived at the cottage, which now housed the remains of the Civil War hero. A detachment of veterans of the Grand Army of the Republic, or GAR, arrived from Saratoga to pitch their tents and guard the family's privacy. On August 4th, a funeral service was held at the cottage. Afterwards, the same train that brought the general and his family to the mountain started the slow, sad trip back to New York City. They stopped in Albany, and the general lay in state overnight at the state capitol building. They continued on to New York City, where on August 8th, millions of people lined the streets for the largest funeral parade in that city's history. Julia Grant, his grieving widow, remained at the cottage until August 31st. Drexel planned to preserve the cottage to honor Grant. In keeping with his wishes, the executors of his estate established the Mount McGregor Memorial Association. In 1890, the cottage was opened as a historical site known as Grant Cottage. From that year until 1985, its caretakers showed the many visitors through rooms that were kept virtually identical to when General Grant was its most famous occupant. In 1985, the last caretaker left the mountain, and the cottage was in danger of being closed. To many, it was unthinkable that such a unique and historically significant site should be lost. Petitions were sent to the state, and the Friends of Grant Cottage was born. The Friends is a nonprofit volunteer organization that holds a position unusual for sites of this kind. While the state of New York owns the cottage, the Friends have assumed the responsibility of managing and staffing the facility. Every year, volunteers guide visitors through the cottage, sharing the story of General Grant's life there. Visitors can see the sick room, where the general finished his memoirs. They can see the chairs on which he slept, and the many personal effects on display. The reception room is where the Grants received many who came to pay their respects to the dying hero. This room also contains the bed in which General Grant, surrounded by his family, passed away. The dining room remains adorned with floral arrangements that were sent for the funeral of the general. Down the path to the eastern outlook, visitors can see the grandeur of the mountains and valley which Grant himself saw over 100 years ago. Special events are held throughout the summer, such as Grant Remembrance Day in July and the Victorian Picnic in August. Programs are held through the season, ranging in topic from Victorian life to natural history. The cottage's history and setting create a perfect backdrop for these educational programs. This is the place where General Grant fought and ultimately won his last and greatest battle. It is a special moment of the past, preserved for the present and for future generations to come.